a core component of one of my first Rogers rules is get comfortable being uncomfortable. Because the whole idea is that if you want to grow and if you're setting goals, by definition, you have to grow. Like if you're involved in goals, it means that you automatically are involved in growth, right?
Right. Hello, goal getters, and welcome to this episode of Goal Getting Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Woodall, and I do appreciate you listening to us today on our weekly podcast where I and or my guests provide tips, strategies, and inspiration to help you get the goals you set. Now, if you're a first-time listener, thanks for stopping by and listening to the show. If you've been a listener, thanks for coming back. And as you know from our last episode, I achieved one of my goals recently, and I am very excited. Our goal is to help you achieve yours too. Now, I'm also excited to share a dynamic guest on our show today. Roger Haskett is one of the most energetic and exciting speakers we've had on our show, and I really enjoyed the time we spent chatting. Roger teaches a great program that you will learn about that is so in line with the Goal Getting Podcast program that I had to have him on our show to share his ideas and his Rogers rules with you. You can find out more about Roger Haskett and his free video series he's going to be offering our listeners on our show notes page at goalgettingpodcast.com/Roger, R-O-G-E-R. That's goalgettingpodcast.com/Roger. Now, I know you're going to enjoy listening to Roger today as much as I've enjoyed it, and I want you to go ahead and have a great show. Hello, goal getters. Welcome to Goal Getting Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Woodall. Welcome back to all of our regular listeners. And if this is your first time to Goal Getting Podcast, thank you for joining us today. You all had a choice out of the many great podcasts to listen to, and I thank you for making Goal Getting Podcast your choice today. Our guest speaker today is our friend Roger Haskett. Roger Haskett helps to make organizations, individuals, and events be more engaging. In his rich and diverse career as a speaker, actor, MC, writer, director, and entrepreneur, Roger developed a unique formula for not only maximizing audience engagement, but influencing employees, members, participants, and everyone he meets to be more engaged and authentic individuals. Roger is an extremely passionate and positive individual with an infectious personality that will captivate and move you, and he believes in creating playful energy, the power of storytelling, and getting people actively involved. He consistently delivers entertaining, interactive, and relevant experiences rooted in his background as both an educator and an actor. Roger's fast-growing company, Engagement Unlimited, offers fresh new products for meetings and events that weave together entertainment, education, team building, and proving to clients that by maximizing participant engagement, ROI can be drastically improved. Now, Roger also holds a BFA in acting and an MA in education, two very diverse career choices there, but he has acted in over 150 films, TV shows, and commercials. You might have seen him in shows like X-Files, Supernatural, Stargate, iRobot, or I think I missed this one, Lovesick, Confessions of a Sex Addict. So Roger is also the creator of Become the Biggest, Best, Most Authentic Leader course, and which we'll talk about some today. So let's welcome Roger to the show. Roger, thank you for being a listener to our show for one, and for visiting us on Goal Getting Podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much, Tony. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for giving me some of your time.
Well, thank you. And again, you have a very impressive background and a great story to share. And I've said enough, I think, at this point. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and why?
Sure. So I do a lot of different things. Diverse is a good word when you were saying I have a diverse background. And I like to usually end my bio on the Confessions of a Sex Addict, because usually if you've seen me in anything, you'll probably have seen me in that. Because, you're looking through the TV guide at night going, what am I going to watch? Like Stargate, X-Files. Oh, wait, Confessions of a Sex Addict. Oh, maybe I'll do a little research on sex addiction. Right. So, but for all the listeners out there, I play the psychiatrist helping to solve sex addiction. So it's nowhere near as,
not the
as
fun part.
Exciting. Yeah. It's not nearly as exciting as the title leads you to think it is. But yeah, so I've done a lot of different things. And, what I found in my life that it didn't matter what I was doing, education, acting, writing, directing, any of the things that I did, I always slammed up against the same thing. And the same thing was my own internal world, that my own self-perpetuated beliefs, the ideas that I carried around inside my head were by far the strongest ideas that either gave me the courage and the strength to do things, or the fear and the lack of resolution to not do things. And so when I started to think of what I was going to be offering back to the world, the stuff that rose to the top for me was the stuff that I had to deal with the most. Like I had to deal with how to become the biggest, best, most authentic version of myself I possibly could if I wanted to do really amazing things. Now, I'm an actor, so I walk into audition rooms all the time. I'm one of those either lucky or cursed actors who I get auditioned for all sorts of things. I'm a little bit of a wild card. I'm like a character actor. I play, cops, and I play doctors, and I play the guy next door, and I play murderers and psychopaths. So I play lots of different things. And I found I was walking into these rooms where I wanted to do magnificent things, really magnificent things. And I was finding it hard to do things that humans can do normally, like breathe. And it wasn't just me that was feeling these things. I looked around the room and all the other professional actors were all experiencing the same sort of pressures. And when I looked around at the world, I looked around at leaders and entrepreneurs and salespeople and people like accountants, and everyone is experiencing the same thing. This is exactly what people experience, that their subconscious world, their internal world, is the world that determines really how they go through life. And now neuroscience. So I'm a big believer in neuroscience. And neuroscience is, we've learned all this great stuff in the last couple of years, really the last 5-10 years. We've learned all this amazing stuff about the way we think and our brains work. And what neuroscience has found out is something that we've known all along, that we've been talking about, our internal world controls our external world much more than our external world controls our internal. Absolutely. And they've now got, absolutely. And they've got actually statistics now where they talk about 90% of the way that our life unfolds is determined by our internal response to what happens to us. So 10% of our life is determined by the external things that life throws in our way. We get married, we lose a child, we lose a limb, we have a promotion, all of these things that happen to us, externally, they really only account for 10% of how our life unfolds. And 90% of our life unfolds based on our internal response. So when we think about where to put our time and energy, Tony, where do we put it? I believe we put it on the internal. I believe that's where we put our time and energy. And if we do that, our external world will become much more glorious.
Absolutely. If you change the big part, the big factor of that, and modify that, you're going to affect the little part, and that's very key. And I know that's part of the teachings that we have in the Goal Getting podcast and the programs that we teach here, is being able to affect that subconscious mind, because it does. 90% is about right. It controls us that much. So how explain neuroscience a little bit to our audience. You know, they may not quite be that familiar with it. Just a brief description.
Sure. And I'm not like any expert in neuroscience. I love reading about it because I find it fascinating. But neuroscience is really just the study of how our brain works. I mean, it's more than that. And it's, there's if I were much more scientific, I would have a much more scientific answer. Right. But really from a layman's point of view, neuroscience is teaching us about how our brains work and how they affect our bodies and how, we go through the world really from the way our brains work. And there's some really interesting statistics in neuroscience now. We know 90% of what we've learned about the human brain, we've learned 90% of it in the last 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? So everything we knew about the human brain before 2010 has been squished down to 10% because we've had an explosion of information coming out of all these studies in neuroscience. And so, for example, if we relate it to goal getting, like one of the longest studies that has ever been conducted on humans has been this 70-year study on Harvard men. So they started, I think, in the 1920s. So it was only men that they were looking at because only men went to Harvard at that time, I think. And what they studied was success. And they basically were looking at what makes these guys successful, what makes certain of these people, like certain of these Harvard men, more successful than others. And like that was sort of what they were looking at. And when they asked the social scientist who was in charge of the study, and they said, what can you tell us? What can you tell us? Like, share with us one thing that you've learned. And this guy said, I'll show you the one big thing that we learned. 70 years we studied. Mm-hmm. And this is the one big thing that we learned. And that is the success that we experience as humans is related to love. And when asked further questions, because you don't often hear scientists talk about love in that way, what he basically meant was that our support network, our support really determines how successful we are in life. And that if we want to be more successful, what we need to have is more support. And this makes sense in terms of our 90-10 as well, like an internal, right, external. You need support to help you manage the way you're going through life, because your 90% will try to take over. So you want large groups of support around you. So for people who are setting goals and getting goals, I believe one of the things that you should be doing is working on your internal world and creating vast networks of support. Right. Love networks of people that you love, that love you.
Right. And that, goes back to a little bit, I think, of the mastermind principle that Napoleon Hill talks about a lot. And actually, before the show here, I just came from a mastermind group that I have some gentlemen that I work with, to do that. And, we're all like-minded. We share the same feelings and love, not necessarily what some people might think of love, but we love what we do. We love each other and the fact that we want to see each other grow. So I think that's very true. You've got to have that like-mindedness and that connection with the networking groups and, instead of mastermind or something like that.
Well, I mean, your podcast is a perfect example of that. Right? Like what you provide is this type of support to people.
Right.
Right. And I would expect experience a huge amount of support by putting out this podcast.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So that this is a perfect example of, like a microcosm of what they're talking about.
Right.
People get support. They come and they listen to either 3 to 5 minute quotes, inspirational quotes, or they come and listen to the longer podcast because they're in a position of going from something that they like a status quo to something that they want. Like, so they're growing, changing and growth always involves discomfort and stress. And so to go through discomfort and stress the best way, you want to have support. You want to have this type of podcast support. You want to have face-to-face support, like you were talking about in terms of a mastermind group.
Right.
It's really important.
Right. Absolutely. Now, you're talking about comfort in a little bit. We're probably getting a little ahead, but I noticed in your course that you talk about, being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And we can get to that a little bit later, but I just wanted your comment there just made me think about that. And, so we always talk about in setting goals that you have to step outside of your comfort zone and doing things like that. So I want to make sure we get to that when we talk more about your course.
Well, we can talk about it right now.
Okay. All right.
Like, the course that we're talking about is 3 free value videos. So there's 3 of them and they're free and they're sort of a mini course. They sort of capture some of the items that I talk about further, but they're a really good way of sort of grounding you in some of the stuff that I talk about how to be the biggest, best, most authentic person, the most authentic leader, the most authentic entrepreneur, the most authentic husband, wife, spouse, parent that you can possibly be. And one of my core components. And so basically what I've done is I created these things called Roger's Rules. And I call them Roger's Rules for 2 very specific and very easy to understand reasons. One is, of course, I'm Roger. And the idea is that they're Roger's rules because at the end of the day, you might look at them and go, yeah, here's 11 rules. I actually think these 5 really speak to me and I'm going to circle these these 5 and star them, but these couple over here are not really for me. Because what I hope at the end of the day is that you'll scratch off Roger in a very loving way, and you'll write your own name, like you'll write Tony's rules, and those will become your rules. Because what's really important is that you figure out what works for you. Right? Like, and this is something that I was reading about on your podcast and one of your quotes, I think. It's really important that you figure out what works for you, not for what works for other people. And one of my first rules is really to own your own process. So own your process. And that means figuring out what it is that you need. Like for you, obviously being part of a mastermind group is a really valuable, support network for you. So, everyone needs to find out what their own process is and then honor it and and do it, actually, do the steps. So anyway, Roger's rules come because it's Roger. The other reason I call it Roger's rules is because if you say it really fast, it sounds like you're saying Roger rules, and that makes me happy.
Oh, yeah.
Right. But so one of my core component of one of my first Roger's rules is get comfortable being uncomfortable. Because the whole idea is that if you want to grow and if you're setting goals, by definition, you have to grow. Like if you're involved in goals, it means that you automatically are involved in growth, right?
Right.
Like
Yep,
it has
absolutely.
to be.
Have to be.
So if you're involved in growth, if you're involved in goals, if you're involved in learning, you have to go through a period of change. And change is always full of discomfort because when you move, this is a scientific principle as well. When you move from one phase to another, when you move from one state to another, you have to break the status quo. And when you break the status quo, what comes in is uncertainty. And uncertainty leads to discomfort. We're humans. We are herd animals. So if we experience new, different from what we're used to, it involves a period of stress and discomfort. So getting comfortable, being uncomfortable is a core component, as you were talking about, a core component of actually getting ahead, like of actually becoming the biggest, best, most authentic person you can be. It has to involve growth, and growth has to involve discomfort, which means you have to have an attitude that discomfort is your friend, that it's like an old friend. Like, here it comes again. I'm learning something. I'm growing. I've got a new goal. Here comes my old friend discomfort. He comes along with me for a while when I need him, and then I don't need him, and bye, off you go, discomfort. Because of course the reality is that once you get to the new system, like the new goal, it fits into your life. Once that happens, then discomfort becomes less of a reality for you, because we're humans. We go on journeys and then we get places, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No, excellent. Now, I have a good friend of mine, Bud Malmstrom, used to always talk about change, and he always said that without change, there is no growth. And to be able to have growth, you have to have that change, which is always uncomfortable for a lot of us. So, you've got to have that, and you will have that, and it's how you take that in and how you use that comfort or lack thereof in your life, I think that determines whether we're a good leader or not. Yeah. So speaking of that, you talked about being a herd animal and everything, and talking about leadership. Your course is about being the best and most awesome leader. And what's your definition of a leader?
So I have a very interesting definition of leader, I think. So my definition is this: anyone who separates from the herd and turns back in an effort to try to affect the herd. So to me, that's what a leader is. So the reality is, like, when we started to put the course together, we had a really fundamental issue to deal with. And that was, who's it for? Who's the market? And my challenge is that I believe that this is for everyone. I believe this is a human issue. I believe that humans have the need to become bigger, better, more authentic versions of themselves. So, we took leader as our first niche, but really, the way I define leader, a leader is really almost everyone. And if you're not a leader at a certain point in your life, you will be at another point. Right. Or for example, anyone who's a parent is a leader.
Exactly.
Like, you can't be a parent without being a leader unless you are a non-existent parent. Like, you don't, or if you're a coach, or if you're a manager, or if or if you're a good friend, like all of those, like everywhere in our life, we're given opportunities to be a leader. And many of the times we don't take it, and many of the times we do, but regardless, we are given opportunities to be leaders all the time. And anyone who is setting goals is a leader, right? Like, even if they're not leading other people at that point, they're leading themselves, because they are leading themselves out of a position that they currently occupy, and they're leading themselves to a new position, a new goal, a new way of being, right? So
exactly.
Yeah. So to me, anyone who's listening to this podcast, the course, how to be a biggest, best, most authentic leader relates to them. Even if they're a solo entrepreneur, even if they're not an entrepreneur and they're just setting goals to try to have a better life, or to have a better relationship, like, all of those people are leaders because they're thinking about their life as a leader would, as in, I am somewhere now and I see somewhere else that I want to go. And to get there, I have to be a leader. Right?
Yep, absolutely. Now, your course has a lot of great modules in it that teaches a lot of different things. How does your course help in setting and getting goals?
Well, I think it helps in like a whole bunch of different ways. And I mean, there's the first way, which is, I believe that, when you go through my course and you deal with, or no, whether it's my course or someone else's course like this, it doesn't matter. Like, I put this together because this is the way I think, and I've taught it to thousands upon thousands of people. And what I hear from them, the reason actually I put together this course. So let me try not to forget that first question, because I will if I'm not careful.
Okay.
The reason I put together the course is because when I go out and I give my talks, when I would be teaching actors or teaching entrepreneurs or leaders, and be doing more like one-offs where I'd go in for an hour or two and I would do a workshop, or I would do a keynote in front of 1,000 people, and I'd be talking to them at the beginning of a conference. What I would get in from the survey results, constantly, I always ask a question. My second to last question is, what didn't resonate with you, or what would you like to see more of? Like, what, to give people an opportunity to have some constructive or some negative feedback, so they can, spill to get out of their minds what they really want to say. And what I get from everyone, what I get from almost every single person who fills out that answer is the same criticism. And the criticism is, Roger, we just wanted more. Like, we wanted more. An hour wasn't enough. 2 hours wasn't enough. 3 hours wasn't enough. We wanted more, because what you're talking about resonates so deeply with us that we want to have more chance to grow more, to change more, to be a bigger, better version of themselves. Because who doesn't want to be a bigger, better version of themselves?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, what I did is I started to put this course together where I put all these different modules, and I sort of took my, process of thinking and my, education background and my acting performance background, and I put it all together and went, here are these, modules. Now, what was the first question?
How does your course help in setting and getting goals?
Yeah. Okay, great. Perfect. So the thing is, I had to do these things. All of the stuff that I talk about, all these Rogers rules, are things I had to do to get out of my own way so that I could be the biggest, best version of myself that I could be. So first off, the quick answer is, I believe the course absolutely helps you create the energy and the attitude internally to actually not only see goals, but actually be able to identify them and go after them. So I think that, all the way through it, it's all about how to manage yourself so that you can go do bigger and better things, be a bigger, better version of yourself. So I think from that point of view, it's overall, that's exactly what the course is about. But even more specifically, each of the rules has components that are very much aligned with goals, because they're all about being a better version. So, get comfortable being uncomfortable is all about setting goals that, I like to think of goals as this way. I was thinking about your Mark Hansen quote, about, think big. And I love it. But I have a very slight, twist that I always make on this, because I think big or think biggest is pressure. When someone says to me, you're not thinking big, or you got to think biggest, be the biggest. I'm always a little bit whoa, how do I aim for the biggest? Because when I aim for it, it probably won't be the biggest. It will probably be smaller. So what I think, the way to think about it is to think bigger, that everyone can think bigger. So when you choose your goal, you ask yourself, am I really thinking the as big as I can? Can I think bigger than this? And then for me, the process of thinking bigger is an easy process. Like, it's like, oh, okay, well, if I said my goal is to have a successful company that balances my home life and my work life, and I only work on things that I love, and I spend time with my family in a loving way, this is my goal, then I go, okay, can I think bigger than that? Like, what's bigger than that? And I go, well, what's bigger than that is what happens if I involve like the world? Like, so what happens if I say I want a company that, that I love working on, that I can balance between my family and work? But what happens if it also helps the world? Like, what happens if it also makes the world a better place? So I think that thinking bigger is a process that everyone can do. Thinking big and thinking biggest are things that I think can block people, because they can go, I might not be thinking big enough. Like, and maybe I won't even say it because maybe it's not big enough.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that. I like the term bigger because, again, a lot of us have limiting beliefs. We talked a little bit about limiting beliefs earlier, and sometimes our beliefs don't even know what big is or biggest is. Exactly. So even if we know, we could probably fathom a little bit bigger, but not necessarily. My thinking says, well, I'm as big as I can be, or that I should be, because that's all I know.
Yeah.
And so maybe you're right. I like that, thinking of using bigger instead of big and biggest.
I really believe in taking pressure off of humans. Like, I believe we have a lot of pressure. Like, my course is all about confidence and personal power and stress. Like, it's all how to manage those, how to have the most personal power, how to make stress something you control, as opposed to stress is something that controls your character. Like, I started my journey when I was 13, and, I start all of my talks with this story about what happened to me when I was 13 and I was chosen as a leader, and how I totally had my black hole experience, where the inside of your head becomes a black hole. I had to stand up and talk in front of people, and everything got sucked into my black hole, my personality, time, gravity, everything got sucked in. And, when I was 13, that was when I had this shocking realization that stress controlled my character. Like, stress in this stressful situation, my character became a function of how much stress I was feeling, and that I did things that were so far outside of my character, things that I was ashamed of, like mortified about at 13, because stress was so powerful that it actually changed my character. So I believe in giving humans as much of a break as possible. I feel that we feel stress all the time. So many of us stop ourselves from saying things out loud. I'm a big believer in saying things out loud. Most of us stop ourselves from saying things out loud because we're afraid, we're stressed by how people are going to respond, right? So to me, think bigger is way less stressful than think big or think biggest. So that's why I like it. I like it because it relieves me from feeling a certain amount of stress, which makes me happier.
Well, I'm going to have to take that forward and share that with folks, because I agree with that. That's, a revelation, I think, because we don't always know what's big, or like I said, it can be too stressful or daunting to be big, and just to be bigger. And, we talk about even goal getting to just go a little bit further, stretch a little bit, stretch goals, not necessarily the best goals or the highest goals, but stretch a little bit.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
I was listening to, Pat Flynn of, a podcast movement, and he was telling everybody, everybody raise your hand, and everybody would raise their hand and said, okay, now raise it a little bit, 2 inches higher, and everybody reached a little. So that's all you got to do is just go a little bit taller, a little bit longer. So to go bigger, not necessarily, jump 500 feet high or something like that. Well, so that's the key.
And it's also because it works for everyone. It's individual, right? Like, bigger is something that I can answer for me.
Right.
Big is something that sort of exists out in the world as something like either I'm successful at identifying or I'm a failure because I don't, Right. And the truth is, come on, Tony, you must have had this experience where you achieve a goal and then you realize, why did I set it so low?
Exactly. Yes.
Like, what was I doing? I was spending all my time going for this goal. And when I got it, I was like, oh, that's nowhere near as big as I thought it was. So to save yourself in those situations, if you're like, to me, think bigger is also a process. It means that it goes on. Like every week you can ask yourself, am I thinking bigger? What's bigger out there? Whereas every week, if you ask yourself, like, what's the biggest goal? Like, I would spend half my weeks, thinking about that. Whereas I can spend 3 minutes thinking about what's bigger. So that's, so it's funny. Think bigger is not even in my course. It's one of the parts that is going to be on my second course. Although all the way through the course, I have that sort of attitude, like where we talk about stretching. And if you want to be the biggest, best, most authentic version of yourself you can be, and I use words like best. Like, like even in the title, I use biggest, best version. Like, so I have no problem with saying that there is stuff to aim for that is even out of your reach. But to me, the process of getting there is simpler and easier and more effective when you think of it as steps, like bigger steps as opposed to the biggest. But the 3-part value video that we're offering, and I believe that these videos, they're all like 15 minutes or so in that sort of range. I think 15, 20 minutes are tremendously valuable. Like to me, they are full of value. And the things that we're talking about are, getting the barf out of leadership. So how to think about stress in a different way, because neuroscience is now teaching us that if we think about stress differently, it affects us differently. So if we just change the way we think about something, it changes its effect on us. Like it's mind blowing. It's like, we would think about it like, well, stress has a certain effect on us. It has the same effect on that person. But they did this study where they took people who are, undergoing a year of extreme stress. And they, they had a control group, and then they had this other group where they said, the way you think about stress really actually makes impact. And if you think about stress as a natural response to actually pump up your body so that you can do more, that stress is actually a way for your body to bring itself to its best and brightest moments so that you can do the biggest and best things possible. If you think about stress that way, stress actually isn't such a bad thing in your life, and that maybe your relationship to stress doesn't have to be so hostile. So that's what they taught this other group of people. Just taught them a different way of thinking of stress. They didn't tell them exercises. They didn't teach them, things to do. They didn't do anything except tell them a different way of thinking. And then a year later, they looked at the 2 groups. The control group had 30% of the people in the control group. 30% had serious physical health problems like heart attacks. Like 30% of these people experiencing the same level of stress. And they went over to the other group where they said, the way you think about stress changes its impact on you. And guess, Tony, how many people, what percentage, 30 over here, experience same group of people having the same type of stress. How many of those people, percentage wise, experienced a serious physical ailment?
I would say less than 10%.
Because this is a story that I'm telling, it's better than that. The answer is 0.
Oh my goodness.
0. So,
wow.
The easiest question you're ever going to get to answer in your life is, which group do you want to be part of? Right? Because obviously we want to be part of the group that thinks differently about stress. So I talk about that. I talk about body language and how people do not put their time and energy wisely, when they are working on anything where they are going to be doing something as a performance, like public speaking, a presentation, a pitch session, meeting with the bank, meeting with, having that really awkward conversation with your teenager about sex, if it's awkward for you, like wherever, like walking into your neighbor's Christmas party where you feel really stressed out because it's a fun networking event, but you find that you're inventing new ways of sweating, as you're walking over to that event. What was I saying about that? I got sidetracked on my side, the sweat dripping down my side image.
Bring back memories from the past. Yeah. Now you're talking about networking and
I know this is my problem, Tony, is that I go sideways on tangents to get to, I think, really interesting points. And then I'm like, where did I start from again? It was somewhere so far back. I can't remember.
Well, I was captivated by the story and just imagining my sweating events that I've had in the past with the stress that we talked about.
Yeah.
You know, that's affected me and how it's affected me, because I know I get very stressed, and I know a lot of the listeners, you know, we all get affected by stress different ways, you know, as far as I'm a stress eater, so it affects my weight loss plans and things like that. So, you know, being able to control that is something we all need to be able to do, I believe. So
I was talking about body language.
Body language.
So what I talk about is how to actually put your time and energy and resources into the part of your performance where it actually will have the best impact, so that you won't be putting all your time into the area that everyone puts their time, which almost always causes their performance to really suffer. So we talk about body language and how to manage that. And then the last value video is how to create a 10% performance punch by just following this very simple, easy 2-minute exercise that neuroscience is teaching us. So how to do this 2-minute simple scientific exercise that will give you, before you walk into any stressful room, it will give you a 10% performance bump. Just by doing this. It's amazing. A super simple thing that you do for 2 minutes. And when you walk into a room, statistically, you will be 10% better than you were before that 2 minutes, exercise. So we talk about those sort of things, in the mini course. Yeah.
Now, when does your course, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, and they should, if they want to get your course, they can go by the link, which I think you have below, the podcast, but they just have to click on that link and it will take them to where they sign up for the 3 videos. And the videos are free. And so if you like them, great. If you don't, just don't, respond. Don't open them. Don't do anything with them. So there's no pressure. There's no problem for anyone. No challenge. If they like the content, they can choose to get more. And if they don't like it, or if they think that it's not valuable, they can stop. There's no problem whatsoever, but I have a lot more content in the 3 videos.
Excellent.
Yeah. So a lot more content, to help people with, becoming the biggest best version of themselves.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And that can be, you will have the link on our show notes at goalgettingpodcast.com/Roger. And there will be a link to the course where you can find out more about it and sign up for it if you want at goalgettingpodcast.com/leader, LEADER. So that's goalgettingpodcast.com/leader. And we will have that on our show notes page as well for a link for you to get to.
It's way better for you guys, whoever's listening, to go through Tony's site. I can give you the other site, but it's got a lot of backslashes, etc. So just go to Tony's. It will take you through, to the course, and you can see what, if you're interested. I mean, you guys have been listening. People have been listening for, however long it's been now. And so you'll have a sense of whether or not you'll be interested. If you're interested, click on it and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I've watched the videos. They're fantastic. The way you present those and your energy is just outstanding, as people can probably tell from the interview today. You've got a lot of energy. So it's a great course, and I definitely recommend that you check it out and see what you think. And when does the course start? Pretty soon, I believe.
Yeah, it's starting at the end of September, early October. There's but I think that as soon as people click on the button underneath the podcast, I think that they can go get the value videos right away. I think
excellent.
I think that what they do is they come to your email every 2 days or so, and they're short. Like, as we were talking before, Tony, about how the future of education, the future of the internet is moving towards smaller, tighter, more focused bits of information, exactly like your quotes, your 3 to 5 minute quotes, which have done such amazing things for your podcast, right?
It has really. And that, we're all very busy, and the best way to get education and to invest in ourselves is to spend a little bit of time at our leisure when we have time to go watch videos or to participate in courses online. I mean, I do it all the time. I'm taking webinars and courses all the time because I have very limited amount of time.
Well, and they're so smart.
They're so smart.
Like, it's so smart to be able to do it this way now. So I have a statistic that I just heard about 3 weeks ago, that online courses are set to double between this year and next year. So the amount that people are putting into online courses, the amount of courses that are out there, the amount that people are using online courses between 2015 and 2016 is set to double. And it's some crazy number. Like it's something like billions of dollars. Like I can't remember exactly, but because it's so smart. Because before, before 15, 20 years ago, you always had to go to get education the same way. You had to read a book. You had to go to a class. You had to go to sit somewhere outside of your home. Now we have these opportunities to get world-class education at our fingertips, at our time, on our schedule, the way we want it. I mean, there's no going back from that. Like there's no going back.
Yeah. You can get it 24/7. And, I commute quite a bit and I do it on my commute. I can watch training, online courses. So it just makes it much more less stressful, I'll put it that way, to be able to have that control over when you want to watch something, when you want to learn. So, and also the other thing is I have a master's in education. So I think about these sort of things. And the reality is that if you really want transformative change, which is what you're talking about, what we're talking about, anyone who's listening to this podcast is interested in transformative change, right? We already talked about that. They wouldn't be here if they weren't thinking that they wanted to transform into something that in their mind is bigger and better. Right? They have goals that they want to get. If you want to have transformational change and you actually want it to take root in your life, it means that you need to do consistent actions, right? You need consistent action. And so what we're really excited by is that we made these short, tight modules that are topic centric so that what will happen is that people will listen and watch over and over and over again to get it into their body. They might watch it. Some people might watch it 15 times in 1 week. Some people might watch it 30 times over a month and a half. Whatever it is, your process, locking in consistent and repeated learnings is the way that you change behavior. And I was just going to talk about that. You offer, ways to lock in the learning, tools in your course to help ensure that people have locked that in.
Totally.
So can you quickly tell us a little bit about the lock-in learning capabilities?
Yeah. So this is one of the things that I find really fascinating. I work a lot in events and meetings, right? Like I talk a lot at conferences. I talk at meetings. I, get flown around to be a keynote speaker. And the conference model that we have, so my company talks a lot about meeting design now, not because I was interested in it so much to begin with, but because to do the things that we want to do, we have to change the way things are designed. Because our old model of education, where someone stands at the front, usually in a light, and downloads information into an audience, classes are like that, conferences are like that, meetings are like that, one person at the front, downloading information into people's heads. This neat idea, this nice, neat, unmessy package doesn't work. If you follow that system, you get something like 5 to 15% of retention so that people go back to their normal lives and 2 days later, they remember 5% of what they've learned. So old systems are getting changed now. We are in an exciting time in educational theory because for the first time, we're actually putting into practice things that we know are true. And what's true is that spacing is a way to learn. So, instead of teaching A, B, 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 C, 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 instead of doing that, which is the normal way we actually have been taught our lives, what you want to do is you want to go A, B, C, D, 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 A, B, C. You want to mix it up and you want to space it out because humans need repetition to really lock it in. And so what we use in my course is, we consistently come back to familiar themes from different angles so that people go, oh, this is how this idea relates in this situation. And we have resource guides where we actually get people to do some work. There's actually work involved where if you want to get better, you want to reach your goal, you got to do some work. There's some work. So we get people to actually write stuff down and because writing stuff down, doing spacing, repeated learnings, this is our educational theory meeting neuroscience as the best way for us to learn.
And that's great. And that's, again, goal getting talks about the same sort of thing. So I want you to, think about that, goal getters, as we go on today. You can go to goalgettingpodcast.com/leader, LEADER, and, you can find out more about the course and sign up. Like I said, I've seen the videos. I love it. And just being able to lock in the learning that you're getting will make it so much easier to take actionable results.
Yes.
When you get out there. So we want you to be able to succeed in what you do and help you get the goals you set. So again, that's goalgettingpodcast.com/leader. Roger, I got to really thank you about the time that you're spending with us today, but I don't want to, go too far into your time. And I've got a couple questions for you if you've got a couple more minutes.
Absolutely. Lay them on me.
All right. Now, as a good leader and to be the best and most awesome leader, we have habits that, help us to become leaders. I'm sure you talk about habits in your course and how to use those. What are some habits that you have that are success habits that have helped you be successful?
Okay. So it's hilarious you asked me this question because, the best success habit I have that I've identified in my life in the last while is that I have become a speaker. So what I do is people pay me to go talk to them about the things that I'm thinking about. And when I'm on stage talking to people or in a workshop or whatever, talking to people, everyone's listening to me. So I have to listen too. So what I've done is I've started to say out loud into the world the things that I think, and I've made it part of my job so that people pay me to do it, so that every week, like not even every week now, daily, I'm constantly sort of forced to, oh yeah, this is a goal that I've set for myself. Like I want to get comfortable being uncomfortable because I'm telling all these other people about how important it is and how I've used it in my life to do amazing and magnificent things. So the habit that I have right now is that I speak out loud and I listen. I've created a world, like a business world for myself where I'm speaking out loud and forcing myself to listen daily now. So that's and that's, to me, that's a little bit of a cheat because really what I'm doing is I'm, forcing myself to have a daily habit, right? Like that's what you're talking about. The daily habit I've had, I do a lot of different things. I'm an actor, I'm a teacher, I'm a writer, I'm a director. In a course of a day, I'm often doing very different things. So it's easy for me not to have a daily habit. So this was one of my ways of pulling that in. So that's one of my habits. Another of my most important daily habits is I wake up in the morning and I've got 3 young kids and I'm tired, like usually in the morning I'm tired. I'm not a coffee drinker or anything. So when I wake up in the morning, a recent habit, so the last 5 years, is I wake up and I think, if I don't get up now and use this time with my kids, I'm never going to have this time again. This day will be gone and this morning special time will never come back. I'll have another chance tomorrow, but today's won't exist ever again. And so I've really used that to help motivate me to being a better father, so that I get up with my kids. I play with them in the morning. We have a rule that there's no computer time in the morning. So we do activities and we play. So that's that's the one that I struggle with constantly because as I wake up, it's easy to not want to get up. But that's a habit that I consciously put into my head in the morning to go, one of the most important things in my life is to be a good father. So to be a good parent, to be a good husband. So to me, starting with that is of utmost importance.
Excellent. That's perfect. That's a great habit to have because our families and our kids especially are, the highlights of our life. I know they were with mine. So especially when they're younger, you want to make sure that you train them and teach them and guide them like a leader.
Yeah.
So, exactly.
Yeah.
So one other question, we talk about it all the time as leaders. Many leaders have quotes that inspire them, that keep them going. And you spoke about the quotes that you listen to on our show. What quote hangs on your wall? Okay,
well, so I've got way too many quotes. So I'm gonna mention a couple. So one of the ones that I have in my my website that kicks off who I am. One of them is a passion is the number one predictor of success in life. If you want success, find passionate people. Something along those lines. So that's one of them. I'm a big believer in passion. But I'm going to push that one off to the side and instead pick my favorite proverb. We were talking before we started that I used to read Proverbs all the time. I grew up in a Baptist household, and it was very common for us to have Bible time. And so I read Proverbs all the time because it really resonated with me, because Proverbs, as you said, Tony, is the first
book of quotes.
Yeah, first book of quotes. And so to me, the number one proverb that has always stuck out in my mind, the number one, is better to, and I paraphrase all my proverbs, so sorry about that, because to me, the actual words don't matter, the concept matters. But the idea of better to eat cold soup with a wife you love than steak with a shrew. And the nastiness to women aside, it's written from a man's point of view, et cetera. Right. The point that I think is valuable is there's no point to any success. There's no point to any happiness. There's no point to any life goal that does not recognize that a full, balanced, happy life is your ultimate goal. A full, balanced, happy life is your goal. Every other goal is leading towards that. Because if you have money and you don't have a wonderful life, you are miserable. If you have a wonderful business and a horrible family life, what are you doing? If you have an amazing family life and a lousy life outside of your family, what are you doing? Because your life is a full one. Your life is never only one part of you. So to me, the quote that always I come back to is the quote that really recognizes that a life, like when you sit at your table at night and look and think, this is my life. If you aren't eating cold soup happily, what are you doing? Yeah.
Amazing. That's a good thought. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Tony. Really. Thank you for sharing your podcast with me. It's been wonderful.
Well, I appreciate you listening to it. And one last thing before we go, again, I want to make sure we respect your time. What is one parting word of wisdom that you have, or parting words of wisdom to our listeners, to be a good leader or to become a better leader?
Yeah. Easy. It's the thing that changed my life around. So, when you listen to my course, you'll talk, there's these key points that I talk about. But in 1997, I had a key moment where I had to decide what I was going to do with my life, whether I was going to give up being an actor, which I loved, or if I was going to figure out how to be an actor that could walk into rooms without having my head all messed up, really stressful rooms. And the one thing I changed, all these other Rogers rules I created after the fact, the one rule that I changed, and this is the rule that I lived by, and I live by, I have a company that lives by this principle as well, is have lots and lots of fun. So my whole life changed when I said, I'm going to walk into audition rooms. I'm not going to think about it acting. I'm not going to think about my intention. I'm not going to think about my given circumstances. I thought about those things somewhat, but my main focus when I walked in that room was just to have the most fun I possibly could. The most fun. And of course, what happened is that everything changed. When I started to have more fun, I started to land work. I started to have more fun. I started to land more work. I started to have more fun as I was working. I started to have more fun in audition rooms. And all of a sudden, auditioning became, for me, after 1997, one of my favorite things to do. It's where I had tons of friends. Many of my friends were actors that used to be my competitors. And I totally changed my attitude because I can't have fun in rooms when I'm sitting next to someone who's stressing me out. Who doesn't stress me out? My friends don't stress me out. They make me happy. So I made everyone in those rooms my friends. It all happened because I changed my attitude about fun and play. So have lots and lots of fun. Be playful. Be playful.
Excellent. That's, life's just too short not to have fun. And,
totally.
So I appreciate that. And folks, we've been talking with Roger Haskett. Roger, thank you so much for being on our show. And we're going to have links to Roger's course, What's the name of your course, Roger?
So it's at durangocourses.com is where you'll find it, but we have a variety of names for it. The name that we're sticking with mostly is become the biggest, best, most authentic leader you possibly can be. And I added things like even in moments of extreme stress or crisis where really important things happen. You can see why it's hard for me. You've listened to me. You can see why it's hard for me to pick a short title.
Exactly. And that's a good title, though. We want to become biggest, best, and the most awesome and the most authentic, and because authenticity is important. So you can find out and get signed up for the course at goalgettingpodcast.com/leader, Leader. So thank you, Roger. I do appreciate you being with us today. It's been great talking with you, and we enjoyed it. And we're going to go out and make sure that we have fun from now on with everything that we do. So thank you, Roger, and we'll talk with you soon.
Thanks, Tony.
Hey, Goal Getters. Thanks for listening to Goal Getting Podcast today. I hope you enjoyed listening to Roger today as much as I enjoyed interviewing him. He's a funny and an engaging speaker and has a great program to share. Becoming the biggest, best, most authentic leader. This free 3-part video series is amazing, and I'm going to sign up at goalgettingpodcast.com/leader if you want to learn to become the biggest, best, most authentic leader, manager, teacher, mother, father. You will learn Roger's rules on Roger's videos. So don't forget to go to our show notes at goalgettingpodcast.com/Roger as well. There will also be links to the video series there. So again, that's the video series at goalgettingpodcast.com/leader, and our show notes are goalgettingpodcast.com/Roger. So thank you again for listening, and I hope you also join us for our goal getting quote of the day each and every day. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.